Today's shiur will begin at the bottom of Daf Chof Amud Beis, at the beginning of the new parak, the third parak of Nedarim. The Mishnah introduces different types of vows that do not need to be rescinded. In other words, the vow is meaningless as far as a vow is concerned, and hence one is not bound from the outset. And as a result, we say that it's a vow that doesn't need to be rescinded by a she'elas chocham, by seeking the absolution of the vow through consultation with a Torah scholar. The Mishnah itself, in addition to introducing these four different categories, it will focus on what's called nidrei ziruzin. As far as the explanation of these four different categories, the Mishnayos themselves, as the parak progresses, will offer explanation. So it's not of immediate importance, of any degree of urgency, in order to explain these terms. So now the Mishnah, Arba Nedarim Hitiru Chachamim. There are four categories of vows that the Chachamim say you don't have to, you're not bound, and you don't need to consult a Chacham for its absolution. Nidrei Ziruzin, Nidrei Havai. You can see we've indicated Chof Dalar Mebeis. That's where the Mishnayos themselves will explain what Nidrei Havai is. Nidrei Shgogois, to be explained on Daf Chof Hey Omid Beis, and V'Nidrei Oinsin, to be explained on Daf Chof Zayin Omid Aleph. And after stating the four categories, this Mishnah focuses on the first, Nidrei Ziruzin Ketzad. What do we mean by Nidrei Ziruzin? Again, we're avoiding translating the word Ziruzin because it's best understood by simply seeing the example. What is meant by Nidrei Ziruzin? A person was interested in selling an article, V'Omar, and he said, Koinam. Koinam is a term that we've seen very often in the past. It's an expression referring to a vow. He vows that the money that he gets for this object will be forbidden to him. She'eni poches loch min hasela. If I reduce the purchase price any less than 4 dinarim, a sela is a coin, and it's also it contains 4 dinarim, another denomination, a quarter the size of a sela. So he says that I'm willing to sell you this item, but I'm not going to sell it to you for any less than 4 dinar. And the vow is in effect saying that any money less than 4 dinar that I get for this object will be forbidden to me from any benefit. V'halo Omer, the buyer, who's not interested in paying a lot of money, he says, Koinim she'eni moisif loch al hashekel. A shekel is 2 dinar. So he is announcing with a vow that I will not benefit from this article if I buy it, if I have to pay any more than 2 dinar. So the seller is saying, I want 4. The buyer is saying, I'm willing to pay 2. The Mishnah continues at the top of Chof Aleph, Shnehem roitzim b'shloisha dinarim. Both are really interested in paying 3 dinar. The Ran at the top of the page, Shneim roitzim b'shloisha dinarim, shamoicha hoyadaitu l'shloisha. The seller initially had in mind 3. The seller, just through what she was saying, was trying to urge the buyer to relinquish his original stated position of 2, and that she asked him she should agree to 3. And that's why the seller spoke the way he did. His reference to 4 was really with the intention of getting 3 for it. Likewise, the buyer, he intended to pay 3. And he had no intention in his vowing other than to urge the seller to agree to that amount. And not to remain intransigent regarding 4 dinar. And it's because of this that the neder doesn't get off the ground. The time of the milsa, the reason for it is this is normal commercial behavior. It's normal for sellers and buyers to deal thusly. And that's why it's not called matters that are in one's heart. Now this is a concept that appears elsewhere. That we say often dvarim shebelev, thoughts that you are thinking. Einam dvarim. Once again, dvarim shebelev einam dvarim. Things that you are merely thinking, that you don't articulate, that you don't utter, they are of no consequence. In this case, we don't say that the dealing here between the two people is in the category of dvarim shebelev, merely internal thoughts, because this is the way people always do business. So therefore, as we see here, there is no vow, because there was never any real intention on the mocher to expect the 4 and for the seller to pay a mere 2. The Gemara. Arba Nedarim hetiru chachamim v'chulei. The Mishnah said there are 4 categories of vows that don't need to be rescinded or to be absolved. In other words, there's no vow to begin with. Omar lei Rabbi Abba bar Momol Rabbi Ami. On the side, by the way, we have a topic heading. And in this piece of Gemara, we'll see Shnei Deos. That's why you already saw a number 1. A few lines later, Rava appears with a number 2. There's a Shnei Deos in Mishnasenu, Rak Aliba de Rabbi Yehuda b'Shem Rabbi Tarfon. Is our Mishnah authored only by Rabbi Tarfon? Afilu Karabon, or maybe our Mishnah can be resolved even according to the opinion of the Rabbanon. Of course, we haven't said what Rabbi Tarfon and the Rabbanon argue about, so now we'll see in the Gemara. So Rabbi Abba says to Rabbi Ami, Amris lon mishmei Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. You have said to us in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, Man Tana Arba Nedarim, who is the Tanaic authority responsible for our Mishnah of the 4 categories of Nedarim? Rabbi Yehuda he, the Omar Mishum Rabbi Tarfon. It is Rabbi Yehuda and his opinion, or his quote of Rabbi Tarfon. That says what? What did Rabbi Yehuda say in the name of Rabbi Tarfon? Li'oila meinecho ne'em nazir, in a case where there are 2 people standing, and they see someone coming from the distance, and one says, I'll be a Nazir if that guy coming from the distance is a Nazir. And the other fellow says, well, I'll be a Nazir if the guy coming from this distance is not a Nazir. So at the time they accepted the Naziriteship, they were not on sure footing, because they made their neder dependent on some outside source, on some outside cause. So at the time they stated the neder, it wasn't a neder stated with assuredness. As a result of that, Rabbi Tarfon holds that there is no Nazirus. Nazirus is a Naziriteship, is a form of vows. It's a subcategory of vows, so what we're saying here applies to all vows. And why is that the case? Lefi sheloi nitno Nazirus elol haflo. Because Nazirus, acceptance of Nazirus, is done, as the Ran explains, only when it's done without conditions. The term hafla, you find in general, when you look at the Meforshim, it means very clear, certain speech. A vow that is made but dependent on some external conditions, so it's not a statement made with certainty. It's a statement that's dependent on something else. So it's not in the category of hafla. Now the word hafla is really based on the Torah pasuk, Ish ki yafli lindor neder l'Hashem. Yafli has to do with clear, certain speech. And that being the case, so our Mishnah represents vows that are taken, that are not categorized as hafla, as clear, certain speech. if we look at the Ran, you could see in the middle of the page, more or less, the Ran says, and likewise with regard to vows, the iskish l'nazirus that are compared to nazirus. The lo chayil elim ken yikabu below t'nai. It doesn't take hold unless one accepts it without any conditions. Hilkoch moicher v'lokeach shetolu nidram b'tnai, the mocher and the lokeach, the seller and the buyer that made their vow dependent on something conditional, afapi she'ovru al tanoim, even though they violate their condition, lo chayli nidrayo, their neder does not take hold. In other words, they in the way the Mishnah presented the mocher, he says, I will not benefit from the money if, and notice there, if it is sold for any less than 4 dinar. So his vow was what? Not to benefit from the item, but the vow itself was stated in a conditional form, and therefore, as the Ran explains it, the vow does not get off the ground. And once again, that's all according to Rabbi Tarfon. The Rabbanon would disagree. However, we continue in the Gemara, Rava Omar, Afilu Tema Rabbanon. You can even set up our Mishnah in accordance with the Rabbanon. Now, the Rabbanon disagreed with the case of the Nazirus. That is, that even though the Nazirus was stated conditionally, when the condition is met, so the person whose condition was met will become a Nazir. However, in our Mishnah, even the Rabbanon will agree that there is no vow. Mikotani shnehem rotsu. Does the language of the Mishnah state that both wanted? That's not what it says. Rather, shnehem roitzim kotani. The language of the Mishnah is in the present constant form. Shnehem roitzim, both want kotani. That's what is stated. Let us look at the Ran explanation on what Rava is saying. Rava Omar, afilu temer rabbanon, mi kotani shnehem rotsu. Does the Mishnah say it in that form of speech? Klomar, the masnisen the nidrei ziruzin, the Mishnah that said that nidrei ziruzin are not nedarim, they are not binding. Lav mishum haflahi. It's not because of that consideration that they lack the certainty of speech. Elo mishum shesamu chachomim daitam. Rather, it's because the chachomim noticed, or they analyzed, shelo nodru bedafka elo lazares. The neder was not with the intent of imposing on themselves any restriction from the outset. It was rather to urge on lazares, to urge on the other party. Demi kotoni rotsu. Does it say in the Mishnah sherotsu shehei mashmauso sherotsu libasof, which would imply that at the end of the deal, at the end of the time frame, they acquiesced to 3. Doesn't say that. Shneim roitzim kotoni. The mashma mitchilo v'yad sof. The expression of the Mishnah is they both want, which indicates from the very outset, they were interested in the sale of 3, of receiving 3 and paying 3 respectively. So that the original neder that was formulated around the numbers 4 on the part of the seller and 2 on the part of the buyer, those numbers were basically irrelevant. So that the vow that they said surrounding those numbers was never meant seriously, as we say, from the very outset. So as far as Rava is concerned, the language of the Mishnah shows us that the Mishnah can conform to all Tanaic authorities, and not, as was suggested before in the number 1 approach, that it would be limited to Rebbe Tarfon. As you can see, there's a slash mark, which indicates that we continue now with a new trend of thought. On the side of the Gemara, we have a nosei topic heading, Hanoidrim Tfei misela. We have a buyer and seller like we had before, and the buyer would be vowing, I am not going to benefit if I get any less than an amount that's more than a selah. And Vasheni Omer Pochos Mishekel. And the buyer says, I won't benefit from the item if I have to pay an amount that would be anything other than less than a shekel. In other words, if I pay an amount less than a shekel, then fine and good. Hayim neder have, does this constitute a real vow? Oy ziruzin have, or is this another example of ziruzin? So we turn to the Gemara. Omar le Ravina le Ravashi. Omar lo tfei misela. The seller says that I won't benefit. He takes the vow, and that he won't benefit from the money received if it's going to be an amount, any amount that is not more than a selah. Now, according to this, if he were to get a selah, that's not enough. He has to get an amount more than a selah. Valo omer, and the buyer says, botzir mishekel, that I'm not going to benefit from the item if the amount that I pay is going to be any amount that is a shekel or more. In other words, only if I'm willing to pay, only if I end up paying less than a shekel, then I'll be able to benefit from it. But if I'm going to pay an amount greater than less than a shekel, then I won't benefit. The question then is, Nidra have or Ziruzin have? Is that an actual neder, or is it also an example of Ziruzin? We glance at the Rosh commentary that you'll find the lower part of the page, the first of the widest lines of the Rosh. Amar le tfei misela, Amar le ihu botzir mishekel. Pirush, O Amar le ihu. The case that the Gemara is asking about, according to the Rosh, is either this one says tfei misela, or the mocher says, the buyer says, the kohen says less than a shekel. Rak shia beinehem yoser mishekel. The point is that the gap between the price of the buyer and the seller is going to be more than a shekel, or 2 dinar. Mi amrinon, do we say masnisen davka kotani b'shein beinehem elo chatzi sela b'mekach hashav shloisha dinrim? Is the Mishnah being very literal in its example, where the gap between the buyer and the seller is 2 dinar in an item that eventually is sold for 3 dinar? Oidarkom lidor kedei lezares avol kishem muflogin zemize yoiser oz ein darkom lezares. Do we say then when the gap is more than 2 dinar, then it's no longer a function of ziruz, but rather they are really serious about their vow? Oh, dilma lav dafka, or maybe the Mishnah's example is not literally a gap of 2 dinar, but in general people will speak thusly, will make these non-vows in order to urge the other party on to changing their stated price. The Gemara answers this by citing a Tanaic source featuring a different topic, but it has to do with the way people speak. Omar Le, Tanina, so Rav Ashi says, you can see an answer to your question from the following Tanaic source. Notice, by the way, that this is all part of a long answer. You have a case of 2 parties, 2 friends. Mr. A is imploring upon Mr. B, was pressuring Mr. B to join him for a meal. The Omar Lo, and Mr. B responds, Koinem beischo shani nichnas tipas soinen shani toyen. He takes a vow, and he says that your house is forbidden unto me for entrance. In other words, I vow not to enter, and I won't even drink a drop of a cold beverage. So under those circumstances, the person was being pressured into visiting and to have a meal, and the respondent says, I'm not even step one foot into your house, and I'm not even eat one drop of or drink one drop of beverage. The result of this is muter likones lebeso velechol kimo velishtos hemenu tipas tsonein. It is allowed for Mr. B to enter the house and eat a little bit and to drink a little drop of cold beverage. When he vowed, I'm not going to enter your house whatsoever, and I'm not going to eat even drink even a drop, his intent was for a full blown. I swear not to eat a full meal and have a full drink. Vamai, why do we say that he is allowed to enter? V'hatipas tsonein komar. Did he not say that he swears not to benefit even from a single drop? Rather, that's the way people speak when they want to say that they want to forswear benefiting from a whole meal and a whole series of drinks. They speak that way, saying even a drop. But that's not what their intention is. Hachanami, so too, when a person says Tfei misela or Pachos mishekel, mishtoi inish hachi, it's also an example of ziruzin. It's not to be taken literally, and it's not therefore stated with any real vow intent. So at this point then, we see Rav Ashi's response to Ravina's question. However, Ravina has a comeback. Omar Lay. Notice this is a question that lasts a number of lines, and essentially we end off in a question form, the issue being unresolved. Ravina says back, Mi Domi. How can you compare the case of the guest being invited for a meal to the case of a commercial transaction? Gabitzonein, tzadikim oimru ma'at v'oisim harbe. When it comes to tzonein, is the case of the fellow being invited over for the meal. The way of the righteous is to speak little and do a lot. Now, what does that mean for us? We look at the Rashi at the top. Midomi gabi tzonein tzadikim oimru ma'at v'oisim harbe v'zeh shoyem mesar b'chaver sheyochel etzlo kimo v'yishta tipa tzonein. The inviter, Mr. A, who is pressuring the fellow to come over to have a little bite and a little drink. When he was pressuring the fellow, his friend, to come over, he had really intended for him to come over for a big meal and a big drink. That's the way of people, righteous people, to say little, offer a little, and then when it comes to action, actually present a lot. And when the guest, Mr. B, said back, I swear I'm not going to have even a drop of drink, that drop that you are offering to me, eini to'em, that's what I'm not going to eat. You're offering, in reality, a large meal. And I'm forswearing the large meal. She didn't have intent to forswear benefiting even from a little drop. Hilkach einu oser b'achilu shtia, or rather, hilkach oser b'achilu shtia meruba umuter lishtois heimenu tipas tzonein. What the vow really covers is a large meal and a lot of drinks, but not a little taste or a little drop of beverage. That's as far as the meal case is concerned, and that's why although the vow was stated in terms of even a morsel I won't eat, he is in effect allowed to eat it, because that was never the intent of the original vow. Aval hacha the dilma haydomar tfei misela daite al pachos misela litain b'shlosha dinrim v'haydomar botzer daite al yoser mishekel litain shlosha dinarim. Rashi continues, v'ziruzin have, and that in effect would also be, like we saw before, ziruzin umuter, and there would be no neder. O dilma dafka komar v'nidra have, or maybe he is being very specific, and because the speakers here have added the detail, namely pochos misela or yoser al shekel. In other words, very simply put, it's not similar to the case of the person being invited, whereas there's no room to think that it's an actual vow. In this case, in the commercial transaction, there is room to think that it's an actual vow, and that's why the Gemara ends off by saying tiboi. We'll read let's read the Gemara again from the second line from the top. Hacha sveikahu. Here, in the case of the commercial transaction, there's an element of doubt. Dilma pachos misela v'yoser al shekel komar v'ziruzin havi. Maybe this too is an example of ziruzin. O dilma davka komar. Or maybe they are being quite literal. V'nidra havi, and it would constitute a real vow. Tiboi. This remains unresolved. So as far as Ravina is concerned, he raised the question. Rav Ashi attempted to answer it, but Ravina is not satisfied with the answer. As you can see, a slash mark appears indicating the following is a new trend of thought. On the side, we have a mivneh. A diamond is featured under the mivneh. The mivneh is the structural note, and the diamond highlights shnei lishonos b'divrei Rav Yehuda. There are two versions as far as what Rav Yehuda says. Now the Gemara. Actually, before we do the Gemara itself, maybe we should take a look at the nosei, the topic heading. Deois bo'inon signon. These are opinions regarding, we'll say, style. Eich achocham poseach or matir haneder. How does a chocham absolve one from a vow? Al yidei charota, is the expression of regret enough? Charota greda shanoder mischoret achshov shenoda. The speaker, the vower, regrets right now. He doesn't have any retroactive second thoughts, but rather from right now he regrets the situation he is in. Oy bepesach. Another form of absolution is called Pesach. Shanoider masbir shmeikor lohoya noider ilu hoyodea kach v'kach, where the vower explains that had he known such and such, he wouldn't have taken the vow at the very outset. In general terms, we can say that the charota method of absolution is much simpler. All that needs to be accomplished is that the speaker, the vower, says, "Oh, I right now regret my having taken the vow." I emphasize on the right now. I now regret. The Pesach method is more difficult. You have to analyze the sage together with the client that's coming for absolution. They together have to analyze: would the vower have made the vow had he thought things out carefully from the outset? And that we call Pesach. As we go through the Gemara, we want to encourage each one to look into the commentaries to what kind of action is, or what kind of absolution is being accepted at any given point in the Gemara. And this topic will keep us involved, certainly till the end of today's shiur. So now the Gemara. Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Rav Asi, Arba Medor Malot Strichim Shelo L'Chacham. Rav Yehuda quotes Rav Asi, and he says that these four Nedarim, these four categories of vows, require absolution through the intervention of a Torah sage. Now Rav Yehuda continues telling his story. He says, Ki Amrisa Kamei de Shmuel Omar, when I said this over to Shmuel, namely that which Rav Asi said, that these four categories need scholarly consultation, Omar So Shmuel said, Tana, Tani, the Tana says, Arba Nedarim Hitiru Chachamim. These 4 categories of vows, the rabbis allowed, meaning they're not vows from the very outset. They don't even begin. And you say in Rav Asi's name that they need to be consulted with by a Torah sage. Rav Yosef Masni Law Lahosh Maitza Bahai Lishna. Rav Yosef presents the above discussion in the following version. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Asi, Ein Chocham Rashoi Lahatir Elo Ke'ain Arba Nedarim Halalu. A Chocham cannot undo a vow unless it resembles the 4 categories of vows in the Mishnah. So what does that mean in practical terms? That a Chacham is restricted in how he can absolve vows to vows that resemble the 4 categories of the Mishnah. Now here, we're not saying that the 4 categories of the Mishnah themselves require scholarly consultation, but rather in general, vow absolution cannot be done unless they resemble the 4 categories of the Mishnah. Kosavar, Rav Asi is of the opinion, Ein poischin becharota, that it's not enough for a person to come and say that I right now regret having made the vow. But rather, as we indicated before, more discussion and analysis between the Chacham and the client is required. We take a look at the Ran, and he makes a presentation that is very, very basic and important in this area of Pesach versus Charota. So now we look at the Ran on the upper part of the narrow lines. Ein chocham matir lekein arba nedarim halalu. Klomar, this is to say, she'ein lo lahatir b'charota elo b'Pesach. The sage is not to absolve through mere statement of regret on the part of the client, but rather he has to, Pesach means literally open up matters and look deeply into it. Shaneder kishu nitar b'Pesach, when a vow is absolved through the Pesach method, mochiach mitocho shu neder tos. It proves within itself. We demonstrate that the vow was a mistake from its outset. It's in this sense like the 4 nedarim, the 4 categories of nedarim of the Mishnah, which we explained aren't real vows from the very outset. But absolution through mere expression of regret, that's not enough. V'hainu taima the odif Pesach mecharata, and it's for the following reason that Pesach is beneficial, more beneficial, is better, is more desirable than Charata. L'fishekol neder shehu nitar b'Pesach, any vow that's rescinded or absolved through Pesach. Harei hanoder oimer shafilu b'tchila keshenodar ilu hoya noisein el liboy oisei Pesach. The vower is saying that even from the very outset, had I paid attention to this particular matter that they reveal, the client with the sage reveal in their discussion, he says, Lo hoya, no there, I wouldn't have vowed. By saying that, we're demonstrating that the vow is essentially was mistaken at the outset. So by doing that, we're saying there really was no vow to begin with. If you say there's no vow to begin with, so we understand that the client is totally in the clear. Avol nedershu nitar b'charota, a vow that would be undone through expression of regret. Eino motze im atzmo shum inyan shilu hoya noisne libo mitchilo shelo hoya noder. He's not revealing anything that had he been more attentive, then he wouldn't have vowed at the outset. Elashu omer achshav. All that he's saying is that right now, mitoch hakas mehirus nadarti v'achshav ani mischared al shenadarti me'olam. He's saying that when I made the vow, I was in a state of wrath, or I was hasty, and it's because of that I made the vow, and right now, I regret having done that. So with that, we gain an insight into the difference between Pesach and Charota, and the Pesach method is a more assured, reliable, complete form of absolution, because, as we said, it demonstrates that at the very outset the neder would not have been taken. In the case of Charota, look at the outset, at the beginning, the man was enraged, and because of his rage, he released some emotional feelings through the vow. So it had some value to him at that point, but just now he regrets it. As you can see, there is a fundamental difference between the two. The Rashi, Dibur Masu Elokein Nedarim Halalu, Rashi says, Vahani hu desharo mishum delesbu mamish. The four categories of the Mishnah are non-vows because there is no substance to them whatsoever. Shar nedarim lo. But other nedarim not so. Shein adam rashay lahatir achi yischarid hanodir me'atzmo. Other kinds of vows, a person cannot release himself from them until he expresses some type of regret. Rashi continues, Kosovar ein poischin b'charata, shein chacham rashoy liftoch v'lomalo nadarta daita dahachi. A chacham, according to Rashi, says, would you have made the neder with this in mind? Kidamrinu lekamon, elohanoder hu yischorei tchila v'yiftach v'yoimalo lo ladas kein nadarti v'u posech tchila b'charata. Rashi's approach, it seems to me, is different than the Ran's approach, and that according to Rashi, the sage is instructed, do not initiate do not prompt the client by saying, would you have made the neder knowing this and this, but rather the client himself has to come forth and say, I regret having made the neder. So that approach is clearly different than the Ran's approach, where Rashi is placing the emphasis on the sage, that the sage shouldn't be the one to open, to start, to prompt the client. As you see, we have new geometric forms that require a little introduction. We glance at the side under the Mivneh heading. The triangle and double underline are featured. Hahu da'asa l'kameh. You see that we have a series of cases where the word hahu is put in a triangle, and you skim down the page, you can see quite a few of them. And in continuing the series marking, we have a double underline under the expression da'asala kameh. So and so came in front of, and you'll see clients coming in front of different rabbis for absolution. And we've written Sidra Shel Maisim, Shebo Noidrim Lifnei Rabbonim Lahatir Nidrim, a series of incidents where vowers came in front of rabbis for absolution of vows. He'ora Yesh Losim Leiv. Here, He'ora means we want to note, or we want you to note, that one should pay attention. Be'ezet Surah Chocham Matir Es HaNeder. Which path or which style is the Chocham using in absolving the vow? Becharota, pshuta and simple regret, al yedei Pesach. Now, as far as our Gemara marking shiur is concerned, we want to recommend that in order to look at each case and analyze what is really the method being used, to look into the commentaries. What we're going to be doing is presenting the Gemara at on a translation level. And the reason for that is that when you look in the commentaries, you sometimes find that the term that one commentary will refer to as Pesach, the other will refer to as Charota, and it could become a bit confusing. So we're going to go through the Gemara, and we might from time to time make reference to one of the Meforshim, but we're emphasizing that we're not revealing the entire story. That requires further analysis. The Gemara, Hahu dasla kamei de Rav Huna, a person who had a vow and wanted it absolved came to Rav Huna Amarle, and Rav Huna asked the fellow, Libcha alecha? Now here we'll look at Rashi. Amarle Libcha alech klomar omeid atal das harishona sheritzoncha adayin bosa neder. Do you still want that vow? Well, in the Gemara we see the fellow says, Amarle lo, no, I don't. I regret it. Visharya, and Rav Huna absolved him. So, following the Rashi approach that we saw before, Rav Huna was poseach becharata. He prompted the fellow to express his regret. The Gemara continues, Hahu de also lekame de Rabba bar Rav Huna. Omarle, and Rabba says to the fellow, Ilu hoyu asora b'nei adam sheyafaisucha b'oisa shah. If there were 10 people that could have assuaged your say angry emotions, yafaisucha means appeased you. Had there been 10 people that could have appeased you when you made the vow, me Nadris, would you have made the vow? Amar le lo. He says no. Had there been 10 people at the time, I would not have made the vow. Vehitiro, and Rabba absolved him of the vow. Well, you see from this, according to Rashi, that for the person to simply express, I right now regret the vow, that wouldn't have been enough. Rather, he had to analyze and look at the situation from the outset. Had at the outset circumstances been different, would you have still made the vow? And he says, no, I wouldn't. And based on that, Rabba bar Huna absolved him. And Rashi, at the end of Dibur Masel, Amar Leilav says, Avol bi'almo ein poisun b'charota. But in general, a simple expression of regret would not be enough. So right here, you see two different approaches to vow absolution, these two stories. And the Rav Huna approach and the Rabba bar Rav Huna approach. We continue in the Gemara. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Omrim lo le'odam, leiv ze alecha. A sage, a chocham, can turn to the client and say, is this... Leiv ze alecha, literally, is this heart upon you? We saw this expression, a similar expression before, libcha alecha, which meant, are you still feeling the same way you did at the beginning? Im amar lav, if he says, no, right now I don't feel the way I did it, I regret it right now. Matirin oso. So we absolve him of it. That was the charota approach. That's poschen b'charata that we saw before, according to Rashi. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi Omer Mishum Aviv. Rabbi Shmuel quotes Rabbi Yossi. Omrim lo le'adam. A sage would say to the client, Ilu hoyu asor b'nei adam shefaisuch b'yisashah. If there had been 10 people to appease you when you were angry at that time when you made the vow, me not just would you have made the vow? Im Omar Lav, if he would say, no, I wouldn't have made the vow, had that been the case at the beginning, Matirin Oso, we absolve him of the vow. So now Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, he, as you can see, holds ein poischin b'charata, as we saw before in the case with Rabba bar Rav Huna, that we don't prompt the client by simply suggesting that if he regrets right now, that would be enough. Hahut also kamei the Rebbe Asi. In the parentheses that the printer has, we have names of rabbis that are coming up: Rav Asi, Ozer, Yochanan, and Yanai. So the first involves a story involving Rav Asi. Amarle, Rav Asi asks the client, Kedu Tohis. Rashi explains, do you regret? Are you mitzta'er? Do you feel bad right now? Amalei, lo, what, you don't think I feel bad? Visharya, and he absolved him of the vow. We were able to learn this Gemara thanks in addition to the Ran, who pointed out that the Amalei lo is to be read with a tmiha tone. The Gemara continues, Hahu d'asala kamei de Rabbi Ozer. Amalei, the Rabbi Ozer asks, Bo'is nodur? Rashi says on this phrase, Kibalta neder mimirtzoncha, did you willingly accept this vow? The Ran on this, it says, Bo'is nodur, roitzata ad achshav benidrucha, do you want till this moment the neder? Elo shemikan ve'en chatam ischare, v'im kain, ein l'cha heter. According to the Ran, that if you are someone that is simply regretting from this point onwards the vow, but you're not regretting it from the very outset, so that's not enough for the vow to be rescinded. So now, that's what Rabbi Ozer was asking the client. Omarle, we continue in the Gemara. The client responds, Ilu lo margizini lo bo'inon klum. Had they not made me angry, going back to the outset, had they not made me angry, I wouldn't have required any vow. I wouldn't have sought out any vow. Omarle, so Rabbi Ozer says, Tehei kibois, so be it as you will. In other words, since you did not accept the vow willingly at the outset, so you are absolved. Be it as you really wanted. Again, this is an additional opinion holding that charota, expression of regret from this point on, is not enough. We continue in the Gemara. Ahi itza da'atriso lebarta. There was a woman that imposed a vow on her daughter. So that you have a woman saying to her daughter that I vow that you shall have no benefit from me. Also, l'kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. The woman comes to Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Law. Rabbi Yochanan says to the mother, Ilu havu yadis de amron megirusayich alo de bartoch, that your megirusayich, that your neighbors, upon hearing the story of your vow, that your neighbors would say about your daughter. We continue at the top of Daf Chof Beis. Ilu lo chamis bo imo milin da'aziva b'chdi lo adresa. Mi adresa? What would the neighbors say? So the top line of Chof Beis, you can see a lot of Aramaic, meaning, had the mother, that's you, had that mother not seen in her daughter some type of reprehensible, immoral behavior, would the mother have vowed for nothing? So, in the eyes of the neighbors, the vow that you took is because your daughter must be guilty of some type of immoral behavior. So that the neighbors are saying, basically, your daughter is immoral. Would you have vowed knowing that would be the result? Mi atrisa, would you have imposed the vow? Omrole, lo. No, I wouldn't have imposed the vow. Visharya, and he absolved her. That's Rabbi Yochanan absolved her of the vow. So you see again an example of the Rav analyzing the circumstances of the vow from the very roots. It could be, according to the Rashi commentary, that from this story we really aren't going to conclude as far as the method of absolution. Be that as it may, this story of Rabbi Yochanan, if you want to use it to reach conclusions about methods of absolution, you'd have to look into additional commentaries beyond that which we've said in our shiur. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.